Welcome to the Strength Connection podcast, a show to share stories, insights, and experiences from some of the greatest coaches in the world. I'm Michael Kurkowski, so grateful for you joining me today. And if you like this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to support the show. All right, let's dive in. Here we go. All right, welcome back to the show, everybody. Jim Laird, good to see you. Welcome back.
Good to see you as well. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me back.
Absolutely. So how long have you been in Nicaragua now?
I moved here last December, so it's like a year, almost a year and a half now. What are we in June? So I guess June would be, what is June 5? Is it the 5th month? So it's almost a year and a half, right? No,
Okay.
May's the 5th month. So with June is the 6th month, right?
6 month, yep.
Yeah, so it's halfway. So it's a year and a half now. So
wow. Okay. What's the biggest difference between living down there and from when you were stateside?
Well, things just happen a lot slower here. You can get a lot of the same things you can in the US. It's just not instant. Like there's no Amazon to your door. Like I have my phone went out, which has been interesting, but I can't just go get a replacement. Doesn't show up at my door. It's probably going to take 3 to 4 weeks for a replacement to get here, if I even get one. Just stuff like that. Things are not instant here. Things happen slowly. I would compare living here to living in the US in like the 1980s.
Okay.
Actually, where I live, it would be more like the 70s because I'm in the country. But if you went to Managua, which is the capital, or Masaya, which is near here, I can get to Managua in about 30 minutes. It would be like living in the US in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. You've got 5-star hotels, you've got sushi, you've got all that stuff. It's just the vast majority of people here don't have the money to enjoy stuff like that on a regular basis. The average salary here is between $200 and $300 a month.
Wow. Yeah. That's gotta be kind of almost nice. It's almost like a forced slowdown from like the hustle and bustle of everything that goes on in the States.
It is. That's one of the reasons I moved here. I wanted a little slower pace. And I also wanted to be able to live a more outdoor simplified life. I wanted, my cost of living is ridiculously low. So I wanted to take advantage of that. Originally, I was planning on building a gym on the beach here, and that didn't work out. So, but yeah, I enjoy being here. The people are wonderful, and it's been a good experience.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, I know last time we had on, we went a lot into the past, like the origins of all that you've done in, decades now of coaching in the different world. And I'm sure we'll touch on some of that, but I want to dive into a lot of the work that you're doing now, specifically with the Vitality Brotherhood and Sisterhood, and working with people specifically over 40 and kind of getting to kick off. I'm always curious about this with people who have been in the business for as long as you had, like from when you started, from like, was it like the 80s and 90s when you first started coaching to now? What's the biggest differences that you see in the people that you work with, as far as, is it the struggles that they're coming with, or like the challenges that they had? Is there a big difference that you see from when like you first got started to what you see now with people?
That's a really good question. I think the big difference now is there's massive amounts of information. It's a lot harder now to get people to buy into, especially simplicity, because, back when I started, really, there wasn't that much information. There was only a few places to go. There's a few forums and things like that. So it was much easier to get people to stick to a plan. Because I came from a bodybuilding background, a lot of the basics about like, using diet to control blood sugar, things like that. I knew that walking outside and getting outside was good for you. Even before I really dove down that rabbit hole, I knew that getting people to eat more protein was good. So a lot of those things I implemented. The level of overall general preparedness of individuals has gone down dramatically. Most of the people in the 90s were still more active than people today. I think they spent more time outside. I think a lot of them grew up as kids, were playing outside. A lot of the people now, the younger people in particular that I see haven't played outside. They haven't played multiple sports. They don't move as well. And if they have trained, they've jumped into things that are way too advanced, way too quickly. So a lot of them are doing fancy things that they don't have the foundation to handle. So I think now the challenge with working with people now is there's just so many options. There's so many choices. There's, a lot of the people that I work with have multiple coaches. They're doing
Right.
multiple different programs. So a lot of it is that the challenge is like simplifying things and getting rid of the noise and you know, it's interesting. There's a lot of great information out there, but many times there's too much of it. And most of the people that I work with are just so frustrated. They've tried keto, they've tried carnivore, they've tried this, they've tried that, and they're on this supplement, they've done this cleanse, and a lot of it is just like, hey, let's simplify this and break it down to the bare basics and start with that and then build on that. And if once we have our foundation, then if we need to use some tools, I'm all for that. But let's not build our foundation on tools.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like it's when you think like because we are like in the information age, there's so much stuff out there, but it's now it's like always about else do I need to add into my day versus what are
Right.
the things that I actually need to refine down and kind of just focus on. And it's the better approach from there. But as you said, like especially with younger people who are going into things that are too advanced or so, what is the detriment to that? Is it more injuries are happening or they're not developing like a strong foundation that can sustain them, so they're jumping from one thing to another? What do you think that is?
So when you're a child and you play, you develop this movement library and you develop efficiency and you develop resilience that you can like later on, by lifting heavy things, but by doing manual labor, by playing, by sprinting, by wrestling, you develop this resilience and you develop this like movement library of efficiency. And when you have an aerobic base because you've rode your bike for hours and you've walked for hours, you've played tag for hours, your body's more efficient. It doesn't have to go into the emergency strategy side of things as quickly. When you don't have a good movement library and you don't have a general physical, like good GPP based foundation, or just generally, if you're not healthy in general, your body has to go into this, like I would call compensatory emergency strategy quicker. Right. So if you don't have a lot of movement options, your body has to use more movement options quicker. That'd be more like an emergency strategy, like someone who's running really hard to get away from something and they're really arched hard.
Mm,
Like arching is naturally, like you look at the great sprinters like Usain Bolt and that, they're going to arch. They're going to naturally have more of an arch because they run in a straight line. But you'll see a lot of the kids that don't move well are going to go to that arch, kind of pin the shoulder blades back. They're going to lock up instead of flowing, right?
right.
So that just ends up you're using joints and capsules to get stability instead of musculature, and instead of being able to like shift into one side, shift into the other side, you're not shifting. You're more like jamming, and that just creates more stress and is harder on the system because the body just is going to do whatever it takes to get the job done. It doesn't care about
Right.
long-term health of joints or capsules. It looks at the situation that's right in front of them as how can I survive this? And
Yeah.
the body's amazing at that. And so the lower your foundation, the less foundation you have, the more emergency survival type strategies you're going to have to use earlier and sooner.
Mm. What do you think is the main culprits for that in it? I mean, obviously it's the technology advancements or so, but is it more people are sitting so much throughout the day or everything's more
Yeah, I mean,
indoors?
I think we're designed to walk all day. We're designed to do manual labor. We're designed to do low level activity and then sprinkle intensity in there from time to time. And kids learn through play. If you look at like I'm 50 years old. I grew up in the, late 70s, 80s, and we played outside all the time. And kids still do here in Nicaragua as well, fairly well. A lot of them are getting phone disease. But in the US now, like you don't see kids playing outside. Like I never saw kids playing outside when I was in Florida or Kentucky. You go drive through neighborhoods, there's nobody outside. These kids are on a screen. It's going to get worse with the goggles and the glasses. So they're not getting that movement library. They're not getting that general physical preparedness, and so their body's having to work harder just to function. That's really the main deal. Is like we've outsourced everything. People don't people don't garden anymore. People don't mow their grass. Their food's delivered to their front door. You don't have to
Mhm.
do jack crap to get anything done. You don't build your houses anymore. I mean, it wasn't that long ago where people built their own garages and their own barns, and people had neighbors come over and do, even in the 70s, people were still doing a lot of their own stuff. Guys were still changing their own oil. That doesn't happen anymore. Like, you think about it, get down under a car and crawl under it, a couple times a month and move around on your back, like people don't do that stuff anymore. Like you ask the average 30, 40-year-old, 50-year-old person, like, when's the last time you like got down on the ground and moved around on your back? And a lot of people, once they get, even kids today, like they're not wrestling, they're not, doing any kind of physical stuff. So if you don't grow up doing it, it's going to be awful hard for you to do it later in life. And then if you haven't done it at all, once you lose the ability to get up and down off the floor and move in different ways, it's like, it's almost impossible to get it back. So I think it's just movement. We don't move, and our body's designed to move. I've noticed when I started working virtually and I wasn't doing much coaching in person, even though I was taking walks, I was working out, my stress levels were much higher
Mhm.
being on the phone, like being on these calls, having to be hyper focused. But when I started coaching baseball again in person, I was having to demonstrate and do the warm up and things like that. I noticed my stress levels went down, my ability to sleep went up just by being more active. So we've taken activity. We have a sedentary indoor lifestyle. Sleep deprivation, broken circadian rhythm combined with not moving is just a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for, you know, being in a more alert state because your body's having to work harder because you don't have a good aerobic base. Your circadian rhythm is broken. You're sleep deprived, which is going to lead to overeating and all those sorts of things, and like not being able to control your appetite. And so that's the foundation of health, I think, is movement combined with circadian rhythm and sleep. That right there is what your foundation should be built on. And then on top of that is like moderate exercise and then intensity on top of that. And then,
Yeah.
you sprinkle the intensity in there. I tell people all the time, if you want to live a long time, and you want to flirt with performance, you don't want to chase it.
Yeah, I love that. So it's funny you said that, Jim. I got hired by a local college here to do a class for the faculty over the
Mhm.
summertime, and I work predominantly virtual. I do some in-person stuff, but usually it's mostly virtual. And just I had the class today just by doing that for the hour and being around and moving, kind of demoing some stuff. You leave
Yeah,
there, posture feels a little bit better. There is just a
yeah.
little bit different energy from just that overall natural movement. And I like what you described there, just having a movement library, just
Mhm.
access to this information that you can pull out. And I was going for a walk the other day, and I have a park that's right by me, and there's a bunch of kids that were playing baseball out there, which is cool. It's awesome.
Yeah.
But there's a huge field right next to that nobody's on. And I just had this uh memory come in is when I was a kid, we had a baseball field, but there was another field next to that. And anytime there was baseball going on, there was a plethora of us on the other field just screwing around and just playing and moving. No organization. It wasn't like a set appointment time. We were just
Yeah.
there. And now it seems like it's everything is appointment based, like, or it's like a game time stuff, not just the free for all play of just going out and just
Yeah.
moving just for the sake of moving.
Everything is timed, and everything is, I get these when I worked with a lot of young kids, adolescents and middle school kids. Their heart rates would be ridiculously high because they'd have soccer practice and it was always structured. It was always like being coached. It was always under pressure. So these kids wouldn't have a good aerobic foundation because they were always doing drills. They were always, doing stuff that was being coached instead of having like nice, easy, play at your pace and develop that aerobic base. I don't know if you know who Joe Ken is.
No.
Um, Coach Ken was the strength coach for the Panthers. He was at Arizona State, Boise State. Great strength coach. And I was talking to him one time about. He's like, yeah. He goes, we hire these people at the Panthers, and pay them like $100,000, $200,000 to get them to come in and teach leadership and like, to these players because we didn't have to do that back when we played because you handed them a baseball bat and you figured out how to pick teams and then you figured out what the rules are going to be and then If one team had one more guy than the other, you figured that out on your own. And if one team was too talented and was killing the other team, then you figured it out. And if you got in a dispute, you got in a fight and you figured that out. And most of the time we didn't need an adult, but sometimes you did. There's none of that going on anymore. The kids are
Yeah.
being, I seen before I left Florida, I saw like 5 and 6 year old kids at structured practice. It looked like a college practice with cones, and it's just like, God almighty. So, yeah, I think that's a big part of the problem.
Yeah, I worked with a great hockey coach, Coach Ron, and he would do a pond hockey league after the season would come in. It was a small, small ice rink, and I remember he would bring all of the parents out like the first day, and he'd say, "Look, there's no organization here. There's no structure. We're barely keeping score. They just
Yeah.
came through an entire season of structure and everything. This is
Yeah.
just for them to fuck around and just to enjoy the process of skating. So I don't want to hear any parents like barking out orders or like different ideas or they're just out there just to have fun and just to play. And you could see the energy in these kids when they were out there. They were falling all over the place and like, trying different stuff. And it was a blast. And they did that for 6 weeks and just enjoyed
Yeah.
the process of it. It was so much fun to watch.
I try and incorporate games and different chaotic things, not too chaotic into warm-ups, particularly working here in Nicaragua. The baseball season here is very long. Um, Pretty much year round. You'll play for one team and then play for another. So I try to incorporate some games and things to get these guys moving in different ways and to get them competing and having fun. I think that's a big part of it. And it's really interesting. Like a bunch of friends of mine that I coach with have now got like, these play-based programs that basically it's like being on a playground. Their parents bring the kids in, they pay to have these kids like climb up and down things and jump over things. To be a kid, like I couldn't imagine having, if you told my parents like, hey, pay us $20 and we're gonna let your kid play. And my parents are like, well, he's already over in the playground climbing everything. He's falling off trees, he's jumping fences. Like now, I always joked that I was gonna like open a farm like in the US, and then I was gonna charge people to work on it, because
Right.
that's basically what working out is. It's like manual labor, right? So we'll be like, hey, this is going to improve your health. It's going to help you lose weight. You're not only going to raise the food, we're going to cook it for you. You got to pay us to work on the farm so you can get in better shape.
It's an amazing idea.
That's essentially what they're doing in the fitness industry, particularly with children now, which, it's fine. It's better than not doing anything, but kids need organic play. I noticed on a lot of the podcasts that they're pushing for children in strength training, which is fine. I think it's appropriate, but we need to play first. Like the strength training should be built on the play foundation, but nobody's talking about getting kids off screens and getting them outside and having them play. There's like, we need to have kids to lift weights. And it's like, we need
Yeah.
kids to move and have fun and climb things that, their body is a barbell, so they need to move around.
100%. Yeah. Did you ever read the book, The Last American Man?
No, I have
It's
not.
I think it's by Elizabeth Gilbert who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, but it was about a guy who lived out in like the woods in North Carolina and he bought a bunch of land and he just completely lived off of the land, like everything from building, shelter to
Yeah.
hunting. And people would come and follow him and he would like charge a thing just to like learn how to live off the land. And like it was a huge thing. Everybody was trying to get out and it was a huge thing. Yeah, getting back to nature and just the simplicity of it, I think for, the big talk of longevity, lifespan versus health span right now, like so much of it, it seems, is just concentrating on the simple things that get us back into that. I know you do a lot of that with Vitality and both the brotherhood and sisterhood in there, but
Sure.
it seems like, yeah, like we've expanded our knowledge base so much, but now what we really need to do is just refine the wisdom down of what it actually is.
Yeah, I agree. It's really interesting this in the longevity space. A lot of the data is based on like rodent models, which I find interesting. Um, Rodents tend to be nocturnal animals, which, isn't not us.
Mhm.
But I spent a lot of time around supercentenarians, particularly when I was growing up. I was fascinated by history and particularly World War I and II. So I spent a lot of time in like senior citizen homes around people that were 105, 103, 100. One guy was 110.
Wow.
Um, like these people are not physically impressive. The people here that are 90, 95 plus that are still working in the fields here with a machete every day and riding horses and riding motorcycles, they're not physically impressive. They're tiny people.
Hmm.
So there's this push to like VO2 max and like train. And yeah, I think you need to have a training base. You need all these things, particularly since we don't have we aren't moving enough, every single day where these people are. They're moving every day for their livelihood, right? And people that tend to live that long, they garden, they do those sorts of things. A lot of them may have had some intense experiences when they were younger, like a world war and things like that. But most of them live a pretty stress-free life and do a lot of outdoor activities. So I'm very careful when they start pushing like everybody needs to be, I think it's great to lift weights. It's going to help you look good. It's going to help you perform, bone density, all that kind of stuff. But we got to be really careful when we start pushing performance for longevity because I don't see your world-class athletes living to be ripe old age of 100 years old.
Right. Yeah.
I just don't like your NFL guys, it'd be interesting to look at gymnasts, wrestlers, track athletes, the life expectancies versus the sports. But generally, your high performers burn out a little sooner than your regular folks.
Yeah. What was some of the long levers that you learned from talking to people who were in their hundreds going into like triple digits and, war veterans, like the secret of, that long life? Are there any specific ones that kind of pop out at you?
Most of them just were like very content with who they were. They had outdoor hobbies. They had generally had family. They had a good support network. They had family that came and seen them. They generally had some sort of purpose. They felt like they had a purpose in life. Like a lot of them were, either teachers or, a lot of them were farmers. Um, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens with life expectancy. I mean, obviously we have life expectancy going up because the people don't die in birth generally anymore.
Right.
In the US, they have an incredible, if you get, break a leg or you like get in an accident, like, they were able to save your life, which in the past you couldn't, generally people don't die of infections anymore. But it'd be interesting to see, like, as people become more indoors, uh, what that does to life expectancy as far as quality of life. We have an incredible sick care system. But
Right.
most of the people now that are in their 80s and 90s are like in diapers and they're not in that great of health, so to speak. Whereas a lot of the folks that I've seen here and a lot of the folks that I saw when I was growing up, they're actually in pretty decent health and they move pretty well for being over 100 years old. So I don't know. I'm always skeptical when people start, saying everybody needs to do this, everybody needs to do that. And I've generally learned in my career that there's always going to be two extremes, and the answer is generally somewhere in the middle. So I think you do need to challenge yourself. You do need to lift some weights, but you know, I don't think everybody needs to max out their VO2 to live their longest life. I didn't see any super centenarians with super high VO2 maxes, or even guys that were super high athletic performers. Most of the guys that I saw that were over 100 years old were just regular Joes. Maybe they went to the war, but they weren't athletes. They weren't pushing performance. They were just regular people, carpenters, farmers,
Yeah.
you know,
That's
people like
interesting.
us.
Yeah, you have a quote there that I love where talking about flirt. You want to flirt with performance. You don't want to marry it. And I
Yes,
think it's because it's contrarian to a lot of messaging that you hear out there of, the optimization culture that we're in right now, where everything is about what's the best way to do something, where
right,
push harder for it. And if you really do look at the stats, as you just mentioned, yeah, a lot of those top high performers and stuff like that, you don't hear of them living, very well and mobile and fluent into their 80s, 90s, 100s. Like usually that is taking some aspects of your life. Now, maybe if you ask them, maybe they would be willing to give up that time for the work that they did in specific fields. I don't know. It's probably very subjective at that time.
right.
I think that's a very important message for people, to look at. And I think it's something that maybe when you get to your 30s, maybe really into your 40s, you start to understand a little bit more because you've gone through some life. You've probably had, your
Mhm.
career down. You probably have like some parts of at least building a family at that time. So things are past kind of what you exactly see in the mirror or what you're trying to project out to the world.
Well, a lot of it is like, what do you need to do? Like, okay, so I spent like 20 years competing in powerlifting and playing football and wrestling and you know, do I need to get any stronger? Do I need to add muscle mass? I mean, I'm 5'10", my body fat percentage is not super low, but it's low enough. It's healthy. Is a percentage that I feel good. I can still see my abs. I'm 240 at 245 at 5'10" at 50. Do I need to gain any more muscle? Probably not. I need to do more walking? Yes. Do I need to do more like skipping and maybe a little short sprinting and some medicine ball throws? Probably. Getting going and lifting heavy things. I challenge myself maybe once a month with like a decent, hack squat or maybe a trap bar deadlift. And the rest of the time I'm doing Tai Chi and I'm working on rope flowing and I'm working on throwing medicine balls.
Mhm.
I'm doing my warm-ups at baseball practice and I still move pretty well for a guy my age. So a lot of it's going to depend on who you are. Like, are you this skinny fat person? And you're probably going to have to push muscle a little harder. Women in particular generally don't carry a lot of muscle, so strength training for them is going to be highly beneficial. Um, so it's like, who are you? What are your goals? And what do you expect? And what do you need? Like, it's like a car. Like, does a top fuel dragster need to get any faster if it's trying to be the fastest? But the thing about a top fuel dragster is it doesn't steer well. It can't steer. It's not
Right.
very comfortable. It doesn't have AC. So like if you're a Camry, there's no maintenance, decent performance, but you're not going to be the fastest in the world, but it's going to last a long time and you're going to have to just do basically the basic oil changes. As soon as you start going up the ladder, Ferraris, Bugattis, Corvettes, things start getting more expensive. Like tires get more expensive, brakes get more expensive. And then when you drive those cars really hard, they break,
Hmm.
So it's just, who are you? What are your goals? And if you're a Camry or a Corolla, you're not going to be able to push as hard as a Corvette or a Bugatti, but then again, you're not going to have the wear and tear on the vehicle. You're not going to
Yep.
have you're not going to blow the engine out of a Corolla unless you friggin' drain the oil out of it. Even then, I saw a show where they had a Toyota and they pulled the oil out of it and drove it and it still
Seriously.
worked. So like, it's so, when you're a little four-cylinder engine, you're not going to blow a piston out the side of it. But, if you're a GTR and you're redlining it on doing drifts and stuff, you're
Hmm.
probably, the chances of blowing a rod out the side of the engine are probable. Like a lot of
Yeah.
people can't run fast enough to hurt themselves, right?
Right.
So it's all relative. Who are you? What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish?
Hmm.
And then basically going from there, it's like, okay, what do I need to do to basically go in that direction and then implement that plan and then see what actually happens? Because we don't know. We have generally an idea of what's going to happen, but we don't until we actually do it, we don't know the true result of what's going to happen.
Yeah. With the kind of the changes in like how people approach or what they think about it from the time that you've kind of worked in coaching, has the approach of how you coach people changed or evolved over time of how you kind of work with people now versus maybe some of the things that you've done before?
It's definitely different virtually, but I think the biggest thing is you have to be a teacher and you have to like break it down step by step by step. Okay. Step one, what is your number one thing we need to work on? Do I have somebody who, um, do I have somebody who's like super stiff or they're having pain in every joint? Like we start talking about, okay, what medications are you on? What activities are you used to be a power lifter? You're still powerlifting and you can't move. Have you driven adaptations that have led to a pain result? Are you on a statin drug, which basically increases the likelihood of pain in people? Are you on any medications that are causing this issue? So it starts going down like this phase of like, who are you? What have you done? What are you doing? What are you taking? And then I go through my 5 fundamentals with everyone. Like, it doesn't matter what the problem is. It's like, get outside 3 times a day and walk. If you can't walk, at least get outside and then do some sort of activity, 10 minutes, 3 times a day, preferably after meals. That, gets you outside, gets your light in the eyes, fixes your circadian rhythm. That just does so many different things. And then eat a protein at every meal, get the lights off at night, drink high quality water, preferably spring water, and then have social connection. There's so many people that I've seen, and even with myself, you could have all the things right, but if you don't have a good social network, if you don't have friends, if you don't have community, and you don't have purpose, like you could have the perfect diet, you could be living in the perfect environment, you could be doing all the things right. Where I got this concept from originally is from a book called The Great Cholesterol Myth. And they talked about a town in Pennsylvania that was like a mining town, and everybody's diets were horrible. And they were like, people smoked, they drank, and they were like, why aren't these people like sicker than everyone else? They weren't, but it was the fact they all went to the bars together. They all went out. Everybody, there was nobody lonely in the community. Everybody knew each other. Everybody worked together. All the families hung out. They went to church together. They had activities. And that social connection made up for a lot of the smoking and a lot of the bad eating. And working in mines, even though they were working in mines, their life expectancy was not any lower than anyone else. So, it's just a matter of like taking a look at people. Okay, what's your foundation look like? Like I have a guy I'm working with right now, I've worked with since December, and he was doing he was a diabetic, and he was doing a diet that actually is supposed to fix diabetes, which is like a keto diet. And turns out he didn't have a gallbladder. So he was getting worse because, he was eating an 80% diet with 80% fat. When you don't have a gallbladder, your gallbladder produces bile. If you can't, or it stores bile. If you can't store bile, you can't digest fat. So he was putting all this fat into his system, which he couldn't absorb or digest. He was having diabetes, having eye problems. And guess what? If you can't absorb fat, you can't absorb vitamin A. I'm obviously not a doctor, but when you put a ton of something in the system and you don't have the ability to absorb it, it's going to cause massive inflammation in your body. So we got him on lean meats, like a vertical style diet, root vegetables, put him on a digestive support, and got him walking outside, got him away from the screens, like taking breaks from screens. He worked on the computer all day, getting some blue blocking glasses. And all of a sudden, 5 months later now, he's not diabetic anymore. And, his eye pressure is way down. His doctor was actually shocked. And so that's what happens when you focus on your wellness and not focus on the illness. And so, it doesn't matter what it is. We're going to look at those fundamentals. Like, are you on birth, are you trying to lose weight? Are you on birth control? A lot of women, they get on birth control or an antidepressant and they start gaining weight and they start training harder. Are you trying to drive with your emergency brake on? Well, you might win. I've had, dozens of, if not countless women over the years that, switched their birth control and all of a sudden they lost body fat, right? Medications, people in pain on statin drugs. I'm not a doctor, so I don't tell them what to do. I just give them a book, give them The Great Cholesterol Myth. Here, read it. Oh, one of the number one side effects of a statin drug, low libido and pain. And they go to their doctor and, hey, do I really need to be on this? Like I'm hurting all the time. And all of a sudden they come off it and the pain goes away within a week or two. The majority of the people that I had, working with over the years, over 50 that were in pain, were on a statin drug, and once they got off it, it went away. Are you on a sleep medication? Okay, you're not sleeping. We got to figure out how to get you sleeping. We got to get you outside. So a lot of it is just playing detective and just figuring out, and a lot of times the things that people are doing, they think are helping them, particularly women. They don't handle intermittent fasting very well. I found that. So you'll have these women that intermittent fast for a while, and then all of a sudden it doesn't work for them anymore. And all of a sudden they start going the other direction.
Why is that? Why is it more difficult for women?
It's a lot harder on their hormones. Like women's hormonal systems are just not set up as to be as robust. They're a little more sensitive. And so there's actually a lady, if you search it, she was on Huberman. She was on another couple, a researcher that studies women and the women don't do well fasted long term, particularly if they're under a lot of stress. In the morning, I've found that people do better fasting at the end of the day and front loading, because generally that getting some protein and fat in you in the morning helps with leptin, helps reset the system. So
Yep.
I've found that people that burn themselves out and you're in a bad place, they need a nice big breakfast, a moderate lunch, and a lighter dinner. I've seen that people, generally speaking, there are exceptions, but people tend to seem to do better if they fast on the back end. That's what I've
Yeah.
experienced.
Probably for sleep
Um,
quality as well. Like,
yeah, absolutely. And generally, you want to eat when the sun's up, right? And so, I've seen, and generally people don't do well on a low carb diet uh, when they're under a lot of stress. Because one of the things that when you're fasting or you're on a low carb diet is your body is using cortisol to help regulate blood sugar.
right.
And so if you're already under using cortisol a ton because you're stressed, um, and then you introduce fasting on top of that or keto, it just tends to burn people out. So one of the nice things about carbohydrates is that it does combat cortisol and helps you relax. So having a little bit of carbs at each meal can dramatically help manage stress. And I've seen people that are, hard charging people generally don't do good on a keto diet and generally don't do good fasting,
Hmm.
particularly over the long term. Now, if people want to fast, I tell them to try to fast at the end of the day or, on a Sunday or something when it's a chill day. You're
Right.
walking, you're doing some Tai Chi, you're not blasting around town. And, it also leads to a lot of overeating for a lot of people because they run around like a chicken with their head cut off during the day and they're all frantic and they forget to eat. And all of a sudden it's 5 o'clock and they gotta slam down 2,000 calories or 1,500 calories. And they just, start binge eating everything they can see. Um,
Hmm.
so that happens a lot. Or they end up eating way too late and then they can't sleep.
Yeah. I want to elaborate a little bit more with the five fundamentals. I'm going to repeat them here,
Yeah,
and then I have some
sure.
questions. So, is walk 3 times a day, protein, fistful of protein at every meal, lights off at night, quality water, and then have a social connection. In the work that you've seen, Jim, is there, do you think there is any hierarchy of like importance if somebody's going to get like the first one in to kind of work with or so, or is
I,
it more like
I
kind of getting
think
all of them?
I think the circadian rhythm part, the sleep part is fundamental. Like if you don't sleep well, if you're not getting outside, like so circadian rhythm manages appetite. Like you look at like the GLP thing, your body produces GLPs naturally. Okay. What disrupts GLP regulation and production? Stress, lack of sleep, broken circadian rhythm.
Mhm.
So we've got a ton of people that don't go outside in the morning. They don't go outside all day. They're on a screen. They can't sleep. They're sleep deprived. And so all of a sudden your regulation of appetite goes out the window. And then we got this endless supply of tasty, refined food that people can't stop eating. And then all of a sudden you like have no impulse control. You're in more of your reptilian
Yep.
brain when you're sleep deprived. So you start making dumb choices. And then you start trying to like, you're revved up all the time and you're in this like over rev state. It's like, well, I'm going to have a couple beers at night. It's going to help me relax. Right. So you fall into this pit of like sleep deprivation where it's like overeating, dumb choices. And then you start medicating yourself, whether it's, alcohol, marijuana, whatever it is to try and get yourself to relax. And then you fall into that tired but wired cycle.
Yep.
So I found that the best way to break that is get outside first thing in the morning, get up, move around a little bit, get out, get the light in your eyes, move around, go for a walk, and walking in more of a relaxed state, like tongue in the roof of your mouth, breathing through your nose. If people do that for 10 minutes, 3 times a day, it's life changing. And it's amazing. I've got people that are like playing tennis hours a week, like older ladies, over 40, 50. They're like, I don't understand. I'm gaining weight in my belly, but I'm playing like 2 hours of tennis every other day. And I tell them like, just go for a walk, put the tongue in the roof of your mouth, breathe through your nose. And a lot of them have Oura rings, which is great because then I can see what it's actually doing to their body.
Okay.
And a lot of these women are really busy. They've got a lot of things going on. And so they don't have a lot of rest and restorative time during the day. And then we add those 3 10-minute walks, and it's not, you know, exercise. It's just observing and
Yep.
relaxing. Look at the birds, breathe. And I know it sounds real like woo woo. All of a sudden, start having more restorative time during the day. All of a sudden, their sleep starts getting better. Their deep sleep goes up. All of a sudden, their resting heart rate comes down. Their respiratory rate comes down. They get more into rest and digest. All of a sudden, they start digesting their food better. So I think the getting outside part is the foundation of everything. And you build on that. That's the one. I'm like, if you can't walk, just get out there and sit. I had one lady that I'm working with. She can't walk very far. She bought a little folding chair and she walks like 1 minute and she puts it down and sits until she can, go up and go again. She's built herself up to walking for 10 minutes. And so, and a lot of people too, they'll power walk there, just
Right.
people today are chronically stressed. I basically say they're sedentary, overstressed. And so I compare it to getting in a car, starting it up and revving the hell out of the engine and never driving anywhere. That's essentially what modern life is. So if we can get people to go out and move and do it in a way where you're calm and relaxed, your neck's not all tight, and you're not, trying to burn
Right. Not
calories.
performance. There's no
Yeah,
performance. Yeah.
you're getting present. How many people are just running through life, just scrolling on their phone and just turned into this like complacent, compliant consumer? If we can get people to get more into rest and digest, all of a sudden they start making better choices. All of a sudden they start sleeping better. All of a sudden they can control their appetite a little better. Then you add in the protein, which helps, regulate appetite as well. It helps maintain muscle mass, helps produce a lot of the materials that you need to sleep better, a lot of the the neurotransmitters and things like that. Helps with thyroid production, et cetera, et cetera. You add that in, and then all of a sudden you're keeping more of your muscle. And then, you add high quality water, preferably spring water. You're getting the minerals and all the different magnesium and things that you need, and you're getting hydrated, which is going to help regulate appetite as well. Then you get the lights off at night, you sleep even better, and you sleep deeper, your hormones improve, everything gets better. And then all of a sudden you start going out and hanging out with friends, you have a good time. And it just turns into this incredible, massive snowball that just rolls down the hill and just continues to get bigger and bigger. But most people just don't have the patience to like stick with these simple habits. And then once you have that as your foundation, then it's like, hey, maybe I want to try a certain supplement, or maybe I want to try a peptide, or maybe I want to do whatever. And you're using it as a tool instead of the foundation.
Right.
If you can't stop eating and you take an appetite suppressant, but your sleep still sucks and all that other stuff, it's going to
Right.
stop working eventually, right? It's like a diabetic taking metformin, right? Metformin's great. It works wonderfully. But if you continue to live your life like an ashtray, you're eating crap, you're not going outside, you're not managing stress, the metformin is going to stop working eventually, and then you're going to have to up the dose, or you're going to have to take something else, and because you didn't fix the root cause, the root fundamental cause. So we want to work on that foundation. And if you want to use a tool, that's fine. Don't build your house on tools, build your house on foundation.
Yeah. Yeah. I found it's funny. I just made this little shift in my morning that has made such a difference in the last 6 weeks of waking up in the morning. And I'm very good at not looking at my phone for the first 30 minutes. I've done
Yeah.
that for a couple years, and that's really helped a lot. But now as soon as I get up, I have my electrolytes and I just get outside and just I walk to the end of this block and back, which is about a 10-minute no more
Yeah.
walk. And
Mm-hmm.
just that 10-minute change up, I feel such a difference cognitively in the first half of my day of getting in. Like up till noon, like everything is just so streamlined just from that little 10-minute shift of getting outside from there. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, people don't understand that light in your eyes. It sets your hormones, your thyroid, everything is managed by the light. And most people don't ever go outside. They don't ever get any sun. They're living under fake lights all day, and people roll their eyes. But man, that sun sets everything. Every cell in your body is managed by the sun,
Yeah.
and so you need to get outside and you need to get your eyes in the light. And it's so simple. People roll their eyes and they scoff when when I mention it, but it's the truth. It makes all the difference in the world, and people just aren't doing it. I mean, I think something like it's like 90% of people spend like 90+% of their day indoors. They never go outside. Like the average maximum security prisoner today gets more outside time than kids do.
Oh my God, it's crazy. It's crazy when you put it that way.
If you look at the stats in the 1970s, people generally spent between 50 to 60% of their day indoors, and they still had incandescent bulbs that had red in it. So the bulbs today, the LEDs just have blue, and blue basically raises your blood sugar. It gets you like There's a lot of blue light in the morning, which spikes cortisol, which is what you want. But you don't want that blue light spiking cortisol the rest of the day. The incandescents at least had some red, which balances out the blue, right? It's the calming, healing part of the spectrum. Now we don't have the incandescents anymore, like candlelight or fire. And that's why like the red light panels and stuff like that. I have a red light
Mhm.
panel in my house that I leave on at night in the background so that, I can see, but it doesn't affect my sleep like a blue light would. And then I'll use it sometimes when I have to work inside when it's raining because I have a metal roof, so you can't hear out here. But um, you need to have that balance, and people are only getting one frequency, which is blue, which is the on switch all the time. So, if you're inside all the time in front of a screen, you could have a really good diet. You could, do all these things, but you've got this light signal that's, go back and look at all the fluorescent light studies they did on children back in the 70s and the behavior problems that it caused.
Mm.
And so there's a great book by John Ott, who's a time-lapse photographer for Disney, and he discovered like, flowers bloom based on light from the sun, like certain frequencies of light. Animals reproduce at certain frequencies, and he studied, in humans, what happens when you put humans under different light frequencies. It's very powerful. And a lot of people just don't even think about it. They're like, it can't be that big a deal. It's a really big deal.
Yeah. With the five in there, is there one that seems very easy for people to adopt and versus one that seems like it's really challenging for the majority of people
Well,
to get
for
into?
women, the protein's a problem. They have a hard time with it. And I tell them all the time, I'm like, look, you don't have to be perfect. Like, just get some protein at every meal. If you haven't eaten any, start with one or two lunch meat, like, Applegate Farms or something. Start with a couple slices, add a little chicken at each meal. You don't have to go from like eating 10, 20 grams of protein, which I see all the time, to eating 130 grams of protein in one day. That's not going to
Right.
work. Just work your way up. And if you're not doing any really aggressive strength training, if you can get close to your body weight in protein, you're going to be fine.
Mhm.
It's just I see most women are like 20, 30 grams a day if they're lucky.
Yeah.
And it's, majority of it is, just carbohydrates and not a lot of protein.
Mhm.
So a lot of liquid calories too. So that protein for women tends to be a little bit of a struggle. I think the social connection is can be a lot of struggle. I see a lot of women, particularly as they're getting a little older, and maybe some of them have decided not to have families. They kind of struggle with that. And because our world is so connected but disconnected,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people that as they get older, they don't have those networks. I know for me, being here in Nicaragua, working virtually, that was very tough because I didn't have a lot of personal interaction. Plus, I don't speak the language well. So that's a big challenge for me. The water one, people will tend to like scoff at the price, but then they'll go out and buy like six cocktails at Ruth Chris or whatever, but they'll be like, oh, this bottled water at Mountain Valley, it's $2.49 a bottle. That's expensive, but I just dropped $15 on $15 per cocktail, on a Friday night out
Yeah.
with my friends, or I just dropped, $75 on a bottle of wine.
Yeah, it's the social one is so interesting. I think Arthur Brooks was talking about that where like online profiles and stuff with everybody that most people are connecting with. It's like a storefront. It's just a bunch of storefronts, but there's no actual store that you're going into. That's the
Right.
depth of a relationship where you're actually sitting down and working with it. So I can see that specifically in the times that we have. Um, but no, I think this is great. Jim, you're the best, man. I really love talking to you. I love the work that you're doing and everything that you're aiming for with
Yeah.
Vitality. So I really appreciate you jumping on today.
Yeah, no problem. If people want to check it out, you can go to my free groups, Vitality Brotherhood, Vitality Sisterhood. I generally end up working with hard charging people that have tried a lot of different things. Some of them have worked with coaches and just haven't seen success. I've worked in a medical practice for the last 3 years, bringing group coaching into the medical practice. So and I've been doing this for like 30 years. I've seen all sorts of things. If you need somebody to help simplify things for you, and then come up with an actionable plan, I can help you do that. And then I also have the Vitality Brotherhood, Vitality Sisterhood, which are free groups. You can come in and learn. I've got all sorts of great information in there, all sorts of places where you can ask questions, exercise library, all sorts of great stuff. So I'd be happy to see you in there.
Beautiful. Yeah, and we'll put that link right in the show notes. So everybody go check that out. Till next time, Jim.
All right, man. Anytime you want to chat, happy to.
Absolutely. Listeners, thank you so much. Catch you on the next one. Peace.